Morning and welcome Barnsley CCG governing body, to which is our last meeting in public before we go into new place arrangements and the integrated care board. Welcome to members of the Barnsley public. I think we've got a number of people that will join us, but we are corporate, so we will start. You're all in your own environments, you know how to keep safe, and you know by now what the etiquette for teams is. So move on to item 2. Kay, apologies.
We have apologies from Nigel Bell.
Thank you. And our medical director will be joining us when she gets the internet connection. So we're corporate, Mark's just arrived, so we can move on. And Jane, could you invite Dan to give the patient story, please?
Will do, thank you, Chair. So ChiliPep, which stands for the Children and Young People's Empowerment Project, is a charity dedicated to raising the voice of children and young people and giving them the confidence, influence and platform to shape their world and stay connected. ChiliPep work with young people across Barnsley, Sheffield and South Yorkshire. And Dan today is going to share with us the story of Jack, who was referred to one of the ChiliPep projects when he was 15. So thank you, Dan, over to you.
So hi, I'm Dan and I work with ChiliPep in the Bruv team. And I want to talk to you a bit about Jack and what he's been doing with the Bruv project. Now, I should say that Bruv is spelled BRV and it stands for Belonging, Resilience and Vocabulary. Now, as you know, ChiliPep works on lots of projects with young people focused on mental health, well-being, and Bruv is just one of them. Now, the aim is to improve emotional literacy with the lads here in Barnsley and give them a better understanding of themselves. They learn the tools and techniques to recognise, communicate and manage their emotions. And the idea is that it helps them realise their capacity and become active and empowered citizens, really. They co-create the curriculum themselves. They have open discussions and take part in both one-to-one and group activities such as learning about emotions such as anger or anxiety and exploring why these surface and how to deal with them when they do. Talking about the risks around antisocial behaviour now, including carrying weapons, smoking and alcohol, and discussing the lockdowns and how that impacted their physical and mental health too, and what they learned from that as well. And finally, socialising together, and that's to encourage communication and bonding through activities or something like sport as well. So we run it over at home, and that's the name for the wellbeing hub that we've got in the town centre. It's a safe space to engage people, and it's something that young people actually told us that was needed here in Barnsley as well. So anyway, back to Jack. He's just turned 15. And he was initially referred to the Bruv project in summer last year to help with his social anxiety. And he joined the group, the under 14s group, which is a 3-month course working through the planned group curriculum. And when he started the sessions and throughout all of the time, to be fair, he was extremely closed in how he came across. And he was really quite apprehensive, really. And he was reluctant to even speak or accept snacks or even drink sometimes. But by the end of the course, Jack had clearly made some progress. I mean, he was able to talk, although it was still limited when we were having group discussions, it was more yes or no type answers. But it was just after that cohort came to an end that one of the Bruv workers actually got a phone call from Jack's mum thanking them for all of his new growth. And after that chat with his mum, it was clear to us that Jack needed more support. You know, he was asking too if he could resit the under 14s group course again, which of course we were able to offer him. Now, through his work with the Bruv team on both of the courses, they worked together to come up with a plan to address his anxiety and also take a look at the issues of how he perceives himself through the eyes of others. Now, the aim with Jack was to sort of build his confidence and his self-esteem and increase his knowledge of understanding of himself. And again, learn to like himself a bit more as well. Now, part of that was to increase the sense of citizenship and belonging and being able to create sort of real positive opportunities and experiences for him to focus on in his future as well, in terms of relationships and emotional well-being. Now, with Jack's consent, the Bruv workers addressed the issues of social anxiety using positive affirmations. There was also some one-to-one group work and some sort of gentle work games as well. And Jack was asked to play a more supportive role within the second course. So, for example, he explained his first experience of the Bruv project to the new lads. And he was being supported by the workers the whole time, you know, just to make sure that he didn't feel out of his depth. Now, as a group, we have sort of worked together, been around with others of his age and participating more within group activities and taking time to lead in discussions. And we found that even throughout the second course, Jack is, you know, already improving with this. So we've arranged that now. And the plan is to promote Jack's growth in a safe and secure environment. What we do is regular sort of checks and reviews of our work and to make sure that, you know, what we could have done differently, or maybe if we had the chance to run the project again, what we could have improved on as well. Now, the next steps for Jack look really, really positive. During one of the group sessions, he actually approached me and explained that it is his birthday coming up and he'd like to try out the over 14s group, knowing full well that it would be a much bigger social challenge than the younger group. And we've arranged that now, and the plan is to promote Jack's growth in a safe and secure environment. As I say, we do regular reviews of our work. Now, for me, having a young person-centered approach means that we're able to respond to Jack's needs and offer him additional support after his first group work experience. And sort of enabling the young people to stay engaged until they are ready to move on it's a really effective way of improving and sustaining their well-being as well. We know it reduces the need of them having more specialists in the specialist services in the future as well. So I suppose if opportunity allowed, we'd like to present some of the programme outside as well in more sort of green spaces, possibly do residentials and trips as well. So that is sort of definitely something to think about for the future as well. A few weeks back, we got an email from Jack's mum, and it said that I can't thank you enough for this group and how much it's sort of helped improve Jack. She's seen a massive improvement, real positive difference in how he communicates with family members, with his peers, and with his teachers as well. And we actually asked Jack what he thought of the project, and he said, at Bruv, I can come and relax, I can understand more about emotions, and I learn about how I see myself and how I think about others as well. And what I've learned at Bruv has helped me deal with difficult situations at school, you know, where I can express myself calmly to my peers and to the adults as well. So we were really, really happy to hear that as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan. So are there any immediate thoughts or reflections that governing body members would wish to share with us? Chris Millington.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Well, what I saw at Chili Pep was the real need to capture young people at a very early stage to create inner confidence. And I did see that. I saw empowerment, which has been mentioned this morning, and bonding for sure. I came away convinced that it really did push the thought into young people's minds that they can do. There were one or two harrowing stories, but that's all part and parcel of opening people up at all stages in life, but particularly Chili Pep, in my opinion, do a fantastic job for their children and young people of Barnsley. So keep doing what you're doing. It's fantastic.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Any other thoughts? Dr. Addy-Cunley.
Thank you, Chair. Jack's story is a very powerful story. We see a lot of young people that sadly with having difficulties managing their emotion. And I think the first step is actually engaging, and that is the difficulty, engaging with the services that will help them. And I just wonder whether positive stories like Jack's can be available for us to play back in the surgeries for people to see and actually see what they can gain by engaging with the services.
Okay, so that may be a good idea, and perhaps, Kirsty, we can look to developing some films that we can share, perhaps in waiting rooms. That would be quite good. I just have a question, and it's Jack comes from a particular environment, and he's got a particular range of issues which he's been helped to address. But in terms of, for those perhaps who don't do as well as Jack, is there any support to help the family or environment dynamic in the home? Because otherwise these things can become more of a refuge. And I just wonder where the support in the home is, because it's the ongoing nurturing that they will need, not just the time when they're in contact with services. So I just wondered if that was something we could think about. I think if Patrick were here, he would tell us a range of services to help. But I think therefore the issue is connectivity between one service to an individual and the more rounded picture and the continuity and support that they continue to get. And what's interesting in my limited experience sometimes is that families also want to respond, but sometimes don't know how. And you can create sometimes an insight into a more nurturing environment, which will help Jack throughout his life. Okay, any other thoughts? No? Okay, thank you, Dan, for that patient story. Thank you all for your comments. Can we move on? We move on to item 5, declarations of interest relevant to the agenda. And of course, all GPs have an interest in item 14, the practice delivery agreement, which is coming to governing body in public, as it has done for several years, for assurance to the governing body and the public on the process followed and the content, with a clear understanding that the financial values of different parts of the PDA are made in the non-conflicted environment of the Primary Care Commissioning Committee. Are there any other declarations of interest that people would like to update the governing body on? No, can't see any. Okay, can we move then please on to item 6, Kirsty, patient and public involvement activity report. And I think in there's again something about young people, the Young People's Engagement Charter. Thank you, Kirsty.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so we've got a couple of items in the activity report this week, this month, sorry, that I wanted to highlight to you. So the first one is around how the future of how we engage with and work alongside our local people and communities. So as we move into an integrated care board, there will be a requirement to have what they call in a people and community strategy. So that's about how we propose to, as I say, work with people, understand what matters to them, how we bring them through sort of the decision-making process. And we're currently working across South Yorkshire to develop that strategy. So there are a number of principles that have been set out by NHS England, and the ask then is for us locally to develop our own strategy that meets the needs of our local communities. So it isn't a one size fits all. So we've been doing quite a bit of work there to understand actually what have we got that really works already. So specifically for us in Barnsley, there's lots of great stuff. You know, and this isn't about starting again afresh. So it's looking at what we've got that really works, but then taking a step back and thinking, actually, have we got an opportunity now, working as a wider partnership to do things a little bit differently? And I think in Barnsley, we've certainly been on that journey, haven't we? So some of the work that we've seen working with communities like the Dearn, where actually we go out and we train people in the Dearn who live there to go out and talk to their peers, their families, their friends. They ask the questions, so it's not, you know, somebody with a clipboard going out that they've never seen before, and a whole range of ways of doing that. So I think it's a really exciting opportunity for us, and as I understand it, the strategy won't be a final version. There's always some flexibility in there, but that's one of the big things that we're working on at the moment. Also in there is one of the things that you just referenced, Nick. So end of last year, I think it was, Chili Pep, so the organisation we commission, who run a whole range of projects, but specifically the young commissioners, started to mobilise, really, I suppose is the word. They mobilised quite a lot of the voluntary community sector groups across Barnsley that are working with young people. They also work with the Youth Council, and they work with all the people that are linked in with their project. So I think all in all, there was probably about 150, 160 young people that came together, and what they pulled together, it's fantastic. If you haven't had a chance to look at the video, that's probably the quickest and easiest way of seeing what they've been doing. But they came together to develop a young person's engagement charter. So what they've set out there is actually what they've said is, if you're going to work with us as young people, these are some of the ways that we would really welcome you to do that. And here are some of the values that we've got, and here are some of the principles. But as well as that, they've given us a whole host of things, less about engagement and more about how they want to feed back and do what we call patient experience information. So there's a whole load of stuff there that will be really helpful for services. So we'll be working with that group, to understand and to sort of, you know, share that across all the providers, and to really see if we can get people to sign up to it. And the other thing is we want that to influence the larger people and community strategy, because you know, there's a significant amount of work that's taken place there by young people in Barnsley, and you know, we really welcome what they've done, and thank everybody for taking part in that, because it's fantastic. And we know that the young commissioners have got a really solid track record of taking young people with them, and really getting to the heart of what they want. So there's those two pieces of work. They will be ongoing, and I think it's you know, for me, it's a really proud moment, I think, to sort of leave the engagement work, because actually it just shows it's going as strong as ever, you know, and it's got a life of its own, which is exactly what we want it to be. So I'll open it up for questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsty. Any questions, Kirsty? I think I have one, Kirsty. How will that be picked up in future, this engagement that the CCG's done in the new place arrangements? I think that's one thing to just bear in mind as we go forward, so we don't lose that. Yeah,
definitely. I think, you know, there's a huge legacy, isn't there? Absolutely huge legacy, both what people have told us, the way that we do things, the relationships we've built up. You know, we've got some real good lessons learned there. So certainly that's part of what we're doing at the moment with this South Yorkshire people and community strategy. So we're feeding that in, and over the past, I don't know, probably 18 months, perhaps 2 years, we've been working towards, I suppose, really knitting together all the people that do engagement, experience, equality, those types of things across our partnership organisations, so that actually a lot of the good work is built into that, and we're picking that up. So it certainly won't be going anywhere at all, and that legacy certainly, you know, if I've got anything to do with it, we'll be carrying on.
Okay, thank you. So if there are no further comments, thoughts or questions, we'll move on to thank you, Kirsty, item 7. Are there any questions from the public?
There are not.
None received. Okay, and that takes us to item 8, which is minutes of the 10th of March governing body, which are here for approval. And does anybody have any comments or seek any clarification, or are we happy to approve those? Okay, can't see any hands up, so we can approve the minutes of the 10th of March and move on to the matters arising report. I think that's all complete. So if there's nothing anybody wishes to share with us from that, we'll move on to, please, Chris, item 10, the Chief Officer's report.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So just a couple of things to update on this time from me. So the first one is the publication of the Donna Okindon report on the maternity incident at Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital. We had an interim report a few months ago with 7 immediate and essential actions, but this is the final report that's landed. What we were required to do is to make sure that all the hospitals in South Yorkshire, so Barnsley patients do access all the hospitals in South Yorkshire. Mums in Barnsley have a choice which hospital they access. Most choose to access Barnsley Hospital for low risk births, but high risk births and pre 28 weeks tend to go to our tertiary centre, which is Sheffield Teaching Hospitals. All the units will be required to complete all the immediate and essential actions, and to assure ourselves, myself, the local maternity and neonatal system, NHS England, and our chief nurse, Jane Sibakumar, will be completing a visit 25th of May, I think is the date in the calendar. And what we'll do is we'll work with the trust just to make sure they're completing all the actions which you'd expect, and also work with them if there's anything they need assistance with. So things like a regional digital system to make sure all the hospital records can be accessed by all professionals is the sort of thing which we can really help with. One of the key things that will come up out those visits is around information systems, about staff culture, staff training. Patient voice is very important. So the Barnsley Maternity Voice Partnership, we call them MVP, we're making sure that patient voice flows through everything that goes through as well. So what we'll do is we'll complete the visit. Obviously, if there's anything comes out of that visit, we can report back, Jane. We can circulate something around, can't we? But I think just to assure governing body that when we see the Okindon report, where there are failings elsewhere in Barnsley, our unit in Barnsley is currently rated good by the CQC. So we don't have any immediate concerns. However, we'll work with the trust just to make sure that it's absolutely where it needs to be. So just to flag that up, and I don't know, Jane, you may mention some more when you come to your report as well. And the only other thing to mention, this isn't something that particularly affects Barnsley, but I thought I had to put in for completeness. There was some new guidance and legislation passed just to amend the regulations on CCG governing bodies. Basically, as we move into transition, a lot of CCG bodies having reduced membership, so it just allows reduced choracy for decision making, but we've maintained our full choracy throughout. So for us, this is not an issue, but I thought I'd just put it in for completeness. So that's me, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I would commend to every member of the governing body that they look at at least the executive summary of the Okindon report, because within it there are, over a period of 20 years, a series of things which people took assurances at face value or took partial assurances, and this included other inquiries, and it also included CQC failures to act fully. And one of the things that's quite remarkable in the changing dynamic and relationships in NHS is they had, I think, 10 chairs and 10 chief exec officers. So again, it tells you something about the importance of handover if you can't get longer continuity. It's an interesting report, and it left me with a thought that probably things like this happen more commonly, but not in as concentrated and persistent a way. So things for all of us to learn and no complacency, I think. But as Chris said, we're currently, we believe, in a good place in Barnsley, at least. John. You're muted, John.
What was Shrewsbury rated as by the CQC?
I can't answer that, John. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's fair to say they'll be inadequate as we sit here today, because obviously they've got these actions. But I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid, John.
Well, you know, because what we need to do is say, well, okay, if CQC have rated them good, and all this has been going off, we can't really accept that everyone who's rated good by the CQC is actually good.
Yeah, I think that, John. So can I just respond to that, Chair? So we do seek further assurances. So I monitor all complaints that come through. So hopefully we'd pick up if there was anything coming through. And obviously we've got the Barnsley Maternity Voices Partnership, where patients tell us their experiences and what's happening there. And we also have our CCG quality group, which picks up anything that the trust are concerned about, or we're picking up concerns as well. And obviously I see it as the great value of CCGs as well, because I think all the Barnsley GPs across all our practices as well would flag up if there was any systemic failings as well. So I would hope between that triangulation of all those sources, we would have picked something up. But you're right, John, it's not, CQC rating is not the be all and end all.
Mark?
Yeah, I think one of the things I found most shocking about it was the percentage of neonatal deaths that hadn't been investigated. And you struggle to see how that could have slipped by over such a prolonged period, but it did.
There's a few things in there. Also, the one thing that struck me was the different cultures that the midwifery teams had and the clinicians had. Instead of being one team, they were, clearly thought themselves as belonging to different teams. So obviously that affects working together and communication. So I'd like to bring Chris in and then Jane, please. Chris Millington.
Thank you, Chair. Yesterday afternoon at the Barnsley Hospital Governors meeting, all of the governors who attended were taken through Donna Okindon's report. I don't mean taken through page by page, because I think there's 367 pages of it, but head of midwifery took us through the highlights of what Barnsley have been doing, and as Chris has already highlighted, we are rated as good at the moment. After she'd done that presentation, I stuck my hand up and said, look, it's great to know where we are, but there's an old saying that says you only know what you know. So there is one of the non-executive directors on Barnsley board who takes particular interest in maternity, and I said or asked, was he convinced and assured as best he could be that when the Okindon team came in, and they're due very shortly into Barnsley, that they're not going to find anything untoward. And he said, well, no one can give 100% assurance, but I am assured and the board are assured as much as possible. And we're here tonight or this afternoon to assure the hospital governors that we've done everything possible to meet the standards and guidance that we've already received. So wearing my separate hat as a hospital governor, I was assured yesterday afternoon that all was as well as it could be.
Thank you, Chris. Jane?
Thanks, Chair. So I did a visit a couple of weeks ago and spent some time with the Director of Nursing, Senior Midwife, the Non-Executive Director, and they took me through, the processes that they've got in place with regards to the action plan, obviously for Okindon and the Kirkup and any of the SIs that they've actually had, and talked me through how they, get that information and work with the midwives and the teams on the ground, and how that obviously the governance towards obviously the board. We went on a walk round, and it's a walk round that they do on a weekly basis around maternity services, and we spoke with staff, we spoke to the senior midwives, and I can honestly say there was no complacency with regards to them being good. They're continually working, they understand what the ask is, they were all familiar with the Okindon report, no matter who we spoke to. So they are living and breathing this, and and there was a real culture within, what the people we spoke to about continually improving the services that they provide for women and babies. So I was assured. The visit, like Chris said, we've got on the 23rd of May. So we're looking forward to obviously going and spending the day with them there for that quality assurance visit.
That all sounds very assuring around maternity services in Barnsley, but I think the Okindon report also tells us something about services in general. And what it showed us is that in an environment where lots of services were inadequate or needed to improve, that the focus was taken off the one area that seemed to have less scrutiny on it. Another thing was the governance trail back to the board and visibility of the board on areas as well. So I think in general terms, not just maternity, what it flags up to us is that where it takes, and these things usually do take, a persistent and difficult effort by a member of the public to coordinate and to get heard and to get seen. Perhaps there's something as well within that action plan, and I think it will be there about strengthening the voice of the public and how they are responded to in a way which satisfies them, or they can take an opinion on, as opposed to we've done this bit, we've responded, tick that one off, because it is a persistence, isn't it? Quite often of parents or members of the public or in bereavement circumstances that push and push. And one of the criticisms of the NHS, therefore, is that we can be a bit insular sometimes, and I think we need to be more responsive to the public. That would be my view. I've got 3 more people coming in again. So Jane, do you want to respond to that? Then Chris Millington, then Chris Edwards, and we'll move on.
Thanks, Nick. Just a quick one really from me, because you're absolutely right. You know, when I read the Okindon report, there were so many similarities to the Francis report, you know, with regards to mid-staffs and, you know, the discussions that we've had as chief nurses and directors of nursing across the region is, you know, we should have learnt a lot of these lessons, you know, years ago via the Francis report, and obviously now we've got the Okindon. So we've really got to learn and improve from these reports that we've got and really embed them into practice, or we'll be here again in another 5, 6, 7, 8 years. You know,
and the report does say that, doesn't it? Failure to learn and failure to act upon what you've learned. It sort of highlights some of that. Thank you, Jane. So Chris Millington, then Chris Edwards.
Yeah, just to echo what you've already said, Nick, in that the voice of the public is so important. And it's the persistence of that voice, the persistence of those that have been affected, that actually pinpoint, force, whatever words you want to use, into outside agencies going in and finding out some of these things. There was a comment made by someone a few weeks ago that said, if the CQC go in and find all is good, then to a certain extent they wasted the time. If they find it's not so good, it's too late. But the voice of the public is so important. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chris.
Yeah, just to respond to you, Nick, really, I think. So each trust is required to have a maternity champion, which is a non-executive member of the board. And they, you know, sort of specialise in maternity, spend time in the unit. Good practice will be spending time at team meetings, understanding from the staff what the issues are. And they call it ward to board reporting, to make sure that the reporting to board comes from the head of midwifery and goes straight to board. So all the board has the issues absolutely from perception of the staff and the delivery of the service. In terms of how it's expected, each trust has to have, they call it a triumvirate, but it's traditionally head of midwifery, senior obstetrician, and then management lead. So that disconnect between midwifery and the obstetrics service is the one that particularly has been an issue. So I just wanted just to flag those up, and Barnsley, I'm sure they'll be the sort of things we're testing out when we visit, and there's a list of about 200 things to go through and make sure that all those things are covered. So it's very much deep assurance, and it's not reassurance. This is assurance. That's the key to change in the language, I think.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So if there's nothing else on the Chief Officer's report, I think we can move on to item 11, which is Jamie COVID-19 recovery and reset.
Apologies, I'm on mute. We're not getting used to this yet, are we? So I'm assuming that that members of the governing body have had an opportunity to read through the papers, which I've now lost. I've got my notes on them, but I wanted to, I guess, just reflect back a little, because we're in a very different place, aren't we? And it's our last governing body. So we did our first COVID update report to governing body in April 2020, which were very early in the pandemic, just after it had been sort of announced as and confirmed as that by the World Health Organization and everyone else. And during April and May, we were in a very different position to what we've been in this April and May, and we were talking about how we were going to set up our command and control arrangements with gold and silver, bronze. We were stepping down some of our meetings, and the report that I presented talked about changes in outpatients and diagnostics and elective, which were about reduced activity, around reconfiguring wards to create more space, expanding critical care capacity, consolidation of some general practice services into their main sites because the difficulties delivering the services. And I guess we've come 2 years down the line, and we're now reporting on how we're moving away from that and aiming to recover services, make sure people who maybe have not been able to access services as easily during that 2-year period are supported and move forward. So I just wanted to reflect on that, given it's been that sort of 2 years since we first did a report on COVID, and I must say it feels like we are now starting to sort of come out of the other end. And I think we had a bit of a false dawn in 2021, but it does feel like that's the position now. Having said that, it's still going to be extremely difficult, isn't it, because of the demand on services as we come out. So in terms of the update, in terms of where we're currently at, I think there were a couple of things that I wanted to highlight. So we do continue to be managed as a level 4 incident. So COVID is still recognised as a national incident by NHS England, and we're still at that level. However, on the back of the sort of reducing levels of COVID that we're seeing, reducing levels of hospitalisation, we touched on it at the last meeting, from the 24th of February, most restrictions were removed, including legal requirements to self-isolate and changes around testing as well from the beginning of April, when free universal testing ended. I think there's a couple of documents that have come out more recently which aim to support the NHS in terms of moving through that, because I think when the requirements for isolation and testing and other things came in, that created challenges in terms of how the NHS managed and worked with patients. So I think we're helpful, and they're both as appendices. I'll not go through, but some guidance around living with COVID testing. So that set out how health services could, for their staff, make sure that they've got access to tests, but also gave advice around patients and how and when they could receive testing. And then I think the bigger one and the more fundamental one that is aimed to support recovery were the changes around infection and prevention control. So the 14th of April, the next steps on infection and prevention control came in. They are intended to support recovery of services, and they do now allow us to begin to move back to more normal distancing, spacing that we saw pre-pandemic. So, for example, in primary care, where we've had to sort of maintain separation of hot and cold, there is now guidance around how you can mix that and allow more people to be in waiting rooms and things like that. So I think that's all I wanted to reference, really, around the guidance and changes, and hopefully that will support us to do as it's intended. I think it's worth referencing that COVID rates do still remain relatively high, and whilst the testing has gone down, we're still seeing numbers, and 1 in 14 at the point of me doing the report, people are infected. So it's still high, it's still impacting on people, and we're still seeing that in terms of impact on workforce across health and care services through our sort of regular sit reps. We're still getting little peaks of higher sickness levels. So that's where we are with that. And then I just wanted to provide a bit of an update, as usual, on the vaccination programme. So everybody's familiar with this. We talk about it each time. But I think just some, again, achievements. So, more than 500,000 vaccines provided to people who are registered with GP practices in Barnsley since we started the programme in December 2020. So, 15 months or whatever that is. We are continuing to provide through the Priory campus site, so sort of paused activity at Apollo Court and Goldthorpe just for now because of demand, but still doing through the Priory campus site, first, second, third primary doses where people are eligible for those, and first and second boosters again where people are eligible. I think the one thing that I wanted to highlight and share with governing body is that we've been doing some more pop-up type activity. So going out, working with St John's into the communities where we know that uptake has been lower, and we've done that over the last couple of months, supported by council colleagues, and been out into Goldthorpe, Thurnscoe, Wunwell, a session in the town centre in the Civic where they run support sessions for homeless people, rough sleepers, etc. And they've come forward. And the last one of them were yesterday, and I just had some update on that. So it were yesterday. It was at Goldthorpe. They vaccinated during the sort of period that they were there, which I think were 4 hours, more than 100 people. And the most of them were for second boosters. They were using it as the convenience, but so 40 odd. But there were 60 that didn't fall into that second booster category. Some people who were coming forward for firsts, who have not had the confidence before, or who have felt that they've not been able to do that, but the convenience of having it in a small site, they've come forward. There was a gentleman who attended yesterday who had had their first vaccine, but then had been having cancer treatment and other treatment and had been ill, and therefore not felt able to get out and attend a vaccination site, but took the opportunity while there was that pop-up close to their house to get that vaccine. We've had a number of people who have attended with sort of elderly family members who have found sort of travelling a little bit more difficult. And because of the nature of the sort of small site and the team, they've been able to actually do the vaccines for some patients while they're sat in their car, you know, to avoid the sort of mobility and getting out. So we're getting some real positive, and I'll try and get some patient sort of story type examples that we can share around in future, but some really positive feedback from them sessions. So as we sort of move through the summer, the expectation is that the second booster, spring booster campaign will come to a sort of stop. This is so not confirmed yet, but we're expecting a slowdown, not doing as much of that, and then potentially a full booster campaign in October. So we've talked this morning about through the summer looking at more areas where the uptake has been lower and increasing the number of pop-ups. So whilst we're not getting 2,000 a day through, which is what we did at Priory Campus on certain times, we're out in them communities targeting the people who have maybe found it more difficult to come or have been more hesitant to come forward. And that's probably my update completed. Thank you. I'll take any questions on any of that.
Chris Millington. Chris.
Yeah, there's the voice of the people. Yes, again, it just proves time and time again that we really have got to think out of the box. And if people aren't coming to us with this vital procedure, then we have got to go to them. So, Jamie, it's good to hear that have things evolved, that rather than one single location now, it's just proved the fact that if we get out into the communities, then it does give the opportunity for people to access that facility for whatever reason. So great news that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Madhuri, did you have something to contribute?
Yeah, thank you, Jamie, for that. Not a comment or a question. Just wanted to check my audio is working, and good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Right. Okay. There was a point just to make there briefly, Jamie, and that is that the autumn campaign will come when the flu jabs come and when the demand for all services increases as we go into the winter. So it appears that we've got a few months perhaps grace to start planning that, so that it's not the massive diversion from normal services into vaccination. And I think that's a reasonable challenge, and I think it can be done, can't it? And I think you're aware of that, but just for the public to understand, as we go back to normalising services, that we will try and do that through the busiest periods as well, and are therefore planning the autumn campaign of vaccination if it comes.
Yeah, and I did note in the paper there isn't yet confirmation of that autumn booster. I think we do expect that it will come. I think there's been a change, hasn't there? So when we were asked to pick up the vaccination programme, deliver that vaccination programme back in December, and then increase activity as we came towards December 2021 to make sure everybody got their vaccine, that were on the back of guidance which said primary care and other services should prioritise vaccination and could pause or slow down other activities to make sure people were vaccinated. Where we've been with the spring campaign, which has been managed in a different way, has been deliver the vaccine alongside delivering core services and minimising impact on those services. So expectation that both happen alongside each other. And what NHS England are saying is, if the JCVI guidance comes, that will be the approach that they would want to take as we move into winter. So it does need that effort on planning to make sure that we can maintain the core primary care services and other services, including community, because there's been a lot of support there, whilst delivering the COVID vaccination and obviously the flu vaccination. And I do think we're in a strong position in Barnsley on that, because of the way that we've set up the model, supported by BHF, the PCN together. A lot of staff who have been identified who were some from practice, but others who are not sort of core general practice staff who have been able to sort of sign on as vaccinators. We're doing all we can to keep them so that we can keep that process separate. But yeah, there's summer's the time to plan for that. Thank you.
Yeah, good. So that's here for information and assurance. Are there any other questions anybody wants to ask of Jamie about COVID-19? No, thank you. So we'll move on, please, Jeremy, to item 12, integrated care at place update.
Thanks, Chair. So there is a presentation in the pack that you've all got. I've got my colleague Joe Minton with me as well today, as Joe has been heavily involved in producing it, along with Andrew Osborne at BNBC as well. So this is a joint health and care plan for Barnsley. Chair, would you prefer us to put the slides up or just work from the pack?
I think that the slides are now becoming increasingly familiar, most of them. So I think you could probably just, well, put them up so in case they're unfamiliar to some people. But put them up.
Yeah,
and
I think it's probably good for the public to see them as well. Let me just pick out the selected slides from there. We're not going to go through them all. I can assure governing body of that. So just a reminder, as I say, I think all governing body members know, but for members of the public, we have our health and care plan. We produced a one-year plan for 21-22, and we've just been through a process of refreshing it for the upcoming financial year as well. The key thing to note is that the plan pulls together the key pieces of work that can only be progressed by working together across our health and care partnership. And the plan that's here today is fundamentally it's a refresh of our previous year's plan. So we've been through a process of refreshing that. We've been to our integrated care partnership group, which is our key partnership group for Barnsley, with all our health and care organisations around the table, and it's been endorsed at the April meeting of that board. We've also been to Health and Wellbeing Board and taken their information and comment as well. So we're now just taking it around all organisations to make sure that everyone is familiar with the plan. We're also working on some materials to support the plan as well. So our comms and engagement teams are working on a version which will put across the intent and objectives of the plan in a clearer, more accessible way, and that will be on our website and on the local authorities' website as well in the future. And then importantly, this is a one-year plan, but we will be, as our new place partnership, top priority will be to produce a 5-year plan for South Yorkshire and Barnsley as a place in South Yorkshire. And it's really important as we do that, we get our involvement and engagement activities right and build on the best practice that we were talking about earlier, and also build on the learning from the people and communication strategy that's currently being produced across our ICS as well. Joe, can you just move us on to the 4 priorities slide? Thank you. So in terms of our 4 priorities for 22-23, we've tried to make it nice and clear and simple. The things we want to focus on. First one is growing our workforce. And we've got a range of activities that sit within that. I think it's probably worth noting that it has been a long, hard slog over the last couple of years for all the reasons that we're all well aware of. Nonetheless, we have achieved many of the aims of our 21-22 plan, and we have colleagues working actively on our 22-23 plan as well. So priority 1 is growing our workforce. Second one is to continue to do, which has been to continue to strengthen our joint approach to prevention, working more closely with our communities and the VCSE sector as a key part of that. And I think excitingly in our new place partnership arrangements, we're seeing increasing engagement and involvement and willingness to be involved from those partners more broadly in the work that we do. The third thing is to improve equity of access, so no wrong door. This goes along with our kind of everybody's business principle that we've had for some time as well. And we have a range of activities there which are supporting that even more closely into the future, building on the work that we've all undertaken with our 1PCN, with our 1BHF, and with the work that we've undertaken with SWIFT around neighbourhood teams as well. And then the final priority is to join up care and support for those with greatest needs. So that's integrated, personalised care. And again, we're focusing on a range of key activities there, for instance, around frailty, where we want to progress our work over the next 12 months. So those are the priorities. Clearly, they are unpacked in more detail in the rest of the pack that you have. What I'm going to ask Joe to do now is just pick up on our just a quick review of 21-22, just a couple of key slides just to pick up on what we've done, what still needs to be done, and then our plan on a page as well, which goes into a little more detail about some of our key priorities for the coming year. Joe, it's okay to hand over to you, and you can take us through those slides. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jeremy, and good morning, everybody. So I'm just going to move us on into the review section of the plan, and this slide is a summary of some of the insight engagement work, some of the key messages that have come from that over the course of 21-22, and hopefully you will see how these are golden threads through the plan that we're taking forward for 22-23. So what people have been telling us is that communication is really important. Been telling us that there is a need to continue to work across boundaries, and obviously that links to our integrated care approach. Services need to be tailored to individuals, so this is about personalised care, and also the importance of involving families and carers in planning and decision making around care. That's some of the really positive work we've done over 21-22, particularly links to how we supported vulnerable people and how we've delivered the COVID vaccination programme, which Jane was just referring to. I think we've learned quite a lot in terms of engaging some of those seldom heard groups and thinking a bit more about people with certain protected characteristics that perhaps find it more difficult to access our services, but often are in the greatest level of need, and strengthened our engagement processes around that. I'm going to move you on a couple of slides just to give you a bit of a flavour of the progress and some of the pieces of work that carry forward into this year. So Jeremy mentioned there, obviously it's been a very, very difficult year in terms of the operational pressures and the COVID pandemic, and particularly I think through winter with the Omicron variant, which perhaps wasn't a huge surprise, but perhaps not fully expected either. What this slide shows is that across a whole number of areas and priorities, we've actually delivered a huge amount of work as a partnership. This is sort of a slide that there's a bit of a we said we would and we have, which is really, really positive. And I don't want to particularly pick out individual pieces of work from this, because I think it's all really important and all really positive progress made in 21-22. Obviously, just because of those challenges we've experienced, and because of some of these pieces of work, transformation pieces do have a longer sort of delivery timeframe anyway. There's certain pieces that have carried forward into this year's plan, or a number of pieces that carried forward into this year's plan. An example of this in the bottom right there around health inequality. So during 21-22, we identified serious mental illness and improving the physical health of people with serious mental illness as a priority for our health inequalities work. And we have made progress this year, including public health undertaking a health needs assessment around this particular patient group. We've done some strong engagement with service users through the Recovery College, but there's more work to do in terms of improving the outcomes, with a particular focus around physical health checks in primary care. Just to move us on again, Jeremy showed you the four overarching priorities. This is a bit of a plan on a page which shows that there's a number of enablers to delivering these priorities and to delivering how we want to work together in the future. So these include our approach to finance and efficiency, including importantly our shift of focus to delivering population health outcomes through a population health management approach, how we use information and share information to support direct care, as well as estates, quality surveillance, commissioning, and engagement. So all things you'd expect to see, but are highlighted as important piece of work in the coming year. The next four slides that follow in your pack unpack those four overarching priorities. I'll just show you this one to give an example. So under each of these priorities, there's a number of deliverables, and under growing our workforce, we expect this year to launch the Barnsley Care Academy. We've actually got a pilot that's due to start in the summer of this year. We will deliver a series of joint recruitment fairs, and a bit of a plug in my background if you've seen it. The first of those is actually happening next week. And we've got good representation from right across our partnership, and a number of people signed up to take part in that event already. We can continue our focus on increasing student placements, and particularly thinking about how we can enhance experience for students and showcase all the great services that are provided in Barnsley, and hopefully retain some of these students to work for our organisations in the future. One thing there's a sort of new focus to our workforce programme, not a new focus to organisations in Barnsley, but to how we look at priorities together, is around being an open and inclusive health and care system. So we're starting to do some thinking about what we can do as a partnership to support that agenda in Barnsley. And really importantly, updating our workforce plan, and there's a shift in the NHS to a longer term planning around workforce. So we aim to create a 5-year workforce plan with Barnsley as part of an initiative across South Yorkshire as well. So for each of the other remaining 3 priorities, there's a similar list of pieces of work. And if you follow the pack through, what it then shows you is how those pieces of work will be taken forward by different groups that are established in Barnsley and reporting through into our integrated care delivery group. And there's also a next level of detail, which includes some of the milestones and impacts and outcomes that we expect this work to deliver. So I'll stop sharing now and very happy to help Jeremy answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Joe. I know governing body have seen much of this plan previously, but I thought it's important just to take it through for the public's benefit. Open to questions, Nick.
Any questions for Jeremy or Joe? Chris Millington.
Chair, thank you. Not so much a question, more a comment really. As a lay member, the vast amount of work that's been done over the last few years in getting us to where we are is impressive, no doubt about it. It's impressive. So it's vital that we are vigorous in our communications, i.e. getting the message out. And one trick that we might be missing is one of the slides which we talk about some success. If I'm sat in a GP waiting room, say, for instance, that one slide that came up there, some success, through the GP TV facility, would go some way to actually getting the message out. I mean, there's just one slide there which talks about something called SDEC, which is same day emergency care within Barnsley Hospital. Superb service, and that's just one vital bit. With nothing there about iHeart. Don't let's hide ourselves under a great big stone. We've got a massive amount of work already completed, and it's all for the benefit of the people of Barnsley and the Greater South Yorkshire. So communication, get the message out, how we're going to do it, how we're going to be vigorous about it, how can we put it out that the general public, people out there in Barnsley can understand and say, well done, Barnsley.
Do you have a response to that, Jeremy?
Yeah, well, I do agree with much of that, and we all do as a partnership, in fact. So Kirsty and colleagues are currently thinking through how we do get the plan out in a much more accessible way, how we might have some films that go alongside it that show some of the successes we've achieved as well. So I think it is important. These documents are really complex. We do our best to kind of present them in a way which is accessible, but there's more we need to do on that, and we do have active plans in place to get that message out more clearly. So yeah, I agree, Chris, that we have quite a lot actually to be proud of at this point. A lot more to do, and no complacency at all, but a lot has been done.
I was thinking about communications for a number of reasons, and I think a lot of the people still use the Barnsley Chronicle and read it, and I look through their articles, and sometimes I wonder how patient friendly they are. I read one recently that still talked about health bosses. It's old fashioned. So where do we reach most people? And they're actually in the waiting rooms while people are waiting for services. And it has to be as patient a friendly message to engage them, and in a way which they can comfortably relate to. So I remember one governing body input many years ago where we had something about a particular service, urology service, and it showed somebody receiving cancer treatment in the hospital. That's one part of their pathway, and if a patient sees that and they're worried about, say, prostate symptoms or something, and they start to relate to that, it causes fear because it's the unknown. So the types of stories, and I know Kirsty has given this a lot of thought, are those about the ordinary patients that turn up, they're peeing, getting up at night, and their sort of journey, so it contextualizes it and shows the good outcomes as well. So it is quite worrying, isn't it, when you see somebody sat in a chair in a hospital environment with infusions going in. Oh, that's waiting for me. And of course, there might be a bit of that waiting, but the whole pathway and support afterwards is very different and much more positive. So I think we're still on a journey with that, and still on a journey with that. And I'm pleased Chris has brought that forward. Are there any other questions for Jeremy or Joe? No? Okay, thank you both, and thank you for refreshing the plan and refreshing our commitment to it and sharing it with the public. Thank you. Can we move then on to item 13, which is a series of combined assurance reports, and I think you're first on, Jamie, with urgent and emergency care, please.
Thank you. Yeah. So it is a more focused report this time to try and just pull out some key areas. We've talked about urgent and emergency care previously, so I've just identified in here the work that we continue to take forward through the Urgent and Emergency Care Board, the sort of key priorities. So one being the front door and the services that are available for people who attend A&E. You know, confirm we have got the GP streaming service in place. It's now consistently there, working with the A&E team and seeing a proportion of patients who attend, so that's a positive. There's additional clinical triage capacity now that the trust have put in place, so triage nursing who support people and direct to not just the GP service but also into the same day emergency care services that Chris referenced and others where appropriate. And to support that further, there is work ongoing to implement an electronic redirection triage kiosk, which is something that NHS England have been trying to roll out after successful pilots in other trusts. That was expected to be in place in May. That may now be a little bit later than that, not for any other reason apart from delays in the supply of the equipment to locate that kiosk. So all the plans are in place, but the equipment has been delayed. Done quite a lot of work. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback now. So yeah, a lot of work around improvements to the directory of services. So Amanda Capper has been working with services across community, mental health services, some of the hospital services, to make sure that they are all appropriately profiled, accessible by 111 and ambulance services, and we've done some work to assess all of the alternatives to ED and make sure that that's worked through. We're seeing some positives of that. So one example being the ambulance service now using Right Care Barnsley more and more appropriately than what they did before, and not conveying everybody into A&E. They're using that pathway to sometimes ambulances take people directly to, again, the same day emergency care services as opposed to going into A&E. So that's a positive. I think on that SDEC, 7-day service for medical and surgical specialties. We're looking at now moving that forward to include frailty, so some of the frailty services sort of for a range of reasons through COVID, supported intermediate care and other things. So we're sort of slowed down a little. That's coming back. I think the SDEC is worth flagging that 7-day service that is in place, maintained every single day, is a real strength, and Barnsley have been successful in getting the capacity in place to make sure that when the rest of the hospital, A&E department, other things are under pressure, that service continues to operate. In other places, when the pressures come, sometimes the staff have to be moved out of their SDECs and they close. We've managed to avoid that, and I think that's really important, because whilst you might need to move the staff to ease the pressure, it actually just has the opposite effect, because what it means is you've not got that release from A&E where people need that further support. So that's really positive. And then the other bit is around sort of winter. So we've done a review of winter from 21-22, and whilst it is only May, we are starting to develop our plans with all different parts of the system over the next few months, so that we've got our plan in place from September 2022. So they're the key things locally. And then I just wanted to reference some work at a South Yorkshire level. It's there for you to see 4 key areas that are being discussed, and there is also now some work taking place as part of the transition to ICB to look at the arrangements for urgent care and how that is managed and governed. And there's a proposal to develop rather than the urgent care board, a urgent and emergency care alliance, which brings together a number of service providers, but also the chairs of each of the place-based urgent and emergency care boards. So I think that's a positive. There's an intention that each place still manages an urgent and emergency care board, and that will feed through. And the other bit in there, I guess, which is not clear in terms of who will be involved, but within that proposed governance, there is also a link into a clinical reference group for urgent and emergency care. So I'm not cited on the thinking further than that, but I think a good recognition that we need to maintain that clinical input. So that's urgent care.
Okay, keep going.
Do you want me to continue? Primary care, again, you know, just because of the focus, what I've included in here is just a bit of an update in terms of the changes coming as part of the general practice arrangements for 22-23, and I've done that on linked to what I'd said around the COVID report, and you know, things moving back to expectations around full delivery. So QOF coming back, that had been paused, changes to the impact and investment fund for the PCN and things. So I've drawn that out, and there's an attachment, the letter that summarises that in more detail. One of the key things which I wanted to flag, and Chris, you referenced IART as being one of our successors. At the top of page 3 in that report, one of the key changes for 2022-23 is that there will be a requirement to bring together, or there will be a bringing together of two funding streams that are currently in place to support extended access. So extended hours, which is paid as part of a DES to general practice, to individual practices, and then the funding that comes to the CCG for CCG commissioned extended access services. So in Barnsley, our IART Barnsley service. That will mean bringing together the current extended hours and the CCG commission service. There are some specific requirements around that that are different from our current model. So the IART Barnsley service offers same-day routine appointments. The expectation is that the service will be able to offer pre-bookable appointments, and will be able to not just do sort of same-day medical, but also some long-term condition support and other things. So in effect, is an extension of general practice to them hours. So that's going to be a challenging process for us just to work that through. There's some networks. I think
for assurance, we want to know that you're on top of it, Jamie.
We're on top of it, yeah. That's why we're just coming on. So we've got the primary care team working with Barnsley Healthcare Federation and the clinical directors to work through what the requirements are, look at the plan, and I think the message that we're hearing up to now from our GP practices is that they want to continue to work in a way that we can offer an at-scale service in Barnsley that is available for all patients, which I think is something that the governing body members would want to see, and is something that we've advocated for quite a while. So the plan will be in place. That has to be submitted by August, and then the service in whatever the new format is will be from October. And then the final bit, and I'm not going to say a lot about this because it's further on the agenda, but obviously is the PDA. So just assurance around that the PDA has been developed with engagement from primary care colleagues through the PDA working group, and schemes developed which will be presented later on the agenda.
Okay, thanks, Jamie.
No,
I think we pushed quite a bit into this 15 minutes, so what I'm going to ask people to do is just focus on the key bit. No, you're okay. Provide us with assurance, and then we can have questions at the end if that's okay. So thank you, Jamie, for those updates.
Thank you.
Jeremy, could we do digital and IT, please?
Yeah, I'll try and give it brief because you've got the paper in front of you. I've just included key points within there. There's a lot of work, nationally mandated work to deliver a shared care record, something that we, of course, believe is fundamental to our plans to integrate health and care more closely. As an ICS, we've bought into the Yorkshire and Humber Shared Care Record solution, and we have a Shared Care Record steering group at an ICS level now set up to deliver against, I will say, the very ambitious targets that we've set ourselves across our ICS to deliver a shared care record, fundamentally getting everything joined up by June 23. But we have got managed to pull in some support at place to help us with that process. We now have a digital program manager appointed and in place, a shared post between the CCG and BMBC, and they're our sort of link now into the ICS digital program team to make sure that we understand the actions and locally that we'll need to undertake over the course of the next few months. That appointment is fairly recent, and our strategic digital group, when it meets next in June, will get its first update on progress, key milestones, and what we need to do at place, and that will raise, I'm sure, a range of issues that we'll need to then the place partnership to tackle in June and July. So that's the key thing we're doing. I think on top of that, there are a range of other activities which are set out in there, which are baselining in many ways activities, again being undertaken across the ICS. One is what good looks like, and that's actually running on a parallel Teams meeting at the moment. We're also looking again at digital inclusion, and we've got a piece of work there again that we are now pushing out across all the places. It's piloted in Barnsley, in Rotherham rather, and now coming to Barnsley as well. And I'm sure there'll be a series of key learnings from that and best practice that we want to make sure are adopted. So there are some important and big pieces of work undertaken, overseen by our strategic digital group and overseen by our ICS digital program management structures as well. Nick, in brief, that's what we're up to at the moment.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on then to Jane, the lock rehabilitation update.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. So the governing body are well versed with regards to these three areas of my portfolio that are included in the assurance report today. As you know, there have been regular updates and for assurance and progress to Quality and Patient Safety Committee and the governing body over the past 12 to 18 months. So first of all, out of area locked rehab beds, there's been an increase in acuity and system pressure causing bed demand within SWIFT to exceed capacity. So there has been an increase in requests for the CCG to spot fund out of area locked rehab beds in Q4. The CCG, so finance and quality, are closely monitoring the spend, and funding is now only agreed for an initial period of 2 weeks, with an update required on when SWIFT will be in a position to repatriate spot funded patients. This does appear at the moment to be effective in avoiding long-term out of area placements, thus managing spend, but also ensuring patients get the right care at the right time and in the right place. So moving on to continuing healthcare. So continuing healthcare received significant assurance in the recent audit undertaken by 360 Assurance. The NHSE KPIs have been maintained, and the service continues to improve and refine processes and being more proactive when completing reviews. Myself and the Chief Finance Officer have discussed this in our one-to-one this week, and we'll be working now to further refine processes and encouraging and working with the team to be more proactive when completing the reviews. So the work that we've done so far has resulted in reductions to some care packages of around £1 million. And then last but not least, complex cases. So recruitment into the team is ongoing following staff leaving and a reconfiguration of some of the posts within this area. Work continues in all the areas to refine financial data and make record keeping as real time as possible. The funding lines of Section 117 and Children's Continuing Care, as we know, achieved a position of significant assurance in the recent 360 Assurance audit. And finally, there has been a significant increase in the number of Section 117 cases requiring an NHS funding contribution, particularly in the second half of 2021-22. And this has presented the CCG with increased financial pressure, but has been mitigated to some extent by close clinical scrutiny and, where appropriate, challenge at the Section 117 panel. So that's my update, unless anybody's got any questions.
Okay, so thanks, Jane. Can we move on to Commissioning of Children's Services? Who's picking that up? Is Patrick here? Jamie, are you picking that up?
I thought he was joining.
Patrick's having difficulty getting into the meeting.
Right. So I can
You can read it out for us.
pick it up. I'm saying what the paper says because I've not had a pre-discussion. But I think the paper is trying to set out some assurance, particularly around, and this links back to the patient story actually earlier, around the emotional health and wellbeing support, the work that has been done across partners, references an ongoing high demand for CAMS services, and obviously we've got proposals later around investment in those services. It also covers off the single point of contact, and I think that should be shared and gives us some assurance that is now established and is progressing well. And the Children and Young People's Hub at the YMCA is now in place. So they're things that we've previously wanted to put in place, the single point of contact to support people to get to the right services when referred through for help were sort of delayed slightly because of COVID and things, but that is now coming forward. So I think that's positive. And then there's also reference around KPIs for CAMS and Compass, which is something that's working through, but supporting the development to transform to 0 to 25 services by 23-24. And then the other bit that I would, I guess, pull out is around autism. So we for a while have identified a gap around autism and a clear all-age autism strategy. We've been working closely with the council on that, and I think last week was the first autism partnership group. So that has been established, brings together people from all different parts of the health and care service and other stakeholders, and that group will be developing our strategy for autism. So I think they're the key bits, and then there's a reference in there to send, but we had a paper last time and plans are going forward on that.
Yeah, so my apologies to Richard. I should have asked you to introduce the report, Richard. In my eagerness to make haste, I forgot to do that. I apologise. Is there anything you would wish to add, Richard, in terms of assurance or the governing body ask on page 82, which basically asks if we feel assured enough from what we've heard on those areas?
I don't think I would add anything really. We've used these reports as a mechanism for sort of elaborating a little bit on some of the items that, for example, sit in our governing body assurance framework, and we've been doing that for several years now. This report today was just because this is the last time we're meeting in public. It was a slightly different way of doing that, but I think it achieves the same objective of just giving governing body members that little bit more detail on some of the very important work that we're doing in some of our key strategic areas. So the ask is exactly as it says in the paper, I think, just to say is governing body sort of assured by what it's heard, really.
I'm assured because I think quite a few of these bits are a summary of pieces of work that have come to the governing body over a number of months now. And we've had several bites at the cherry, particularly with CHC complex cases. Primary care update is as it is, and the PDA part of that is the next item. Do we feel assured as a governing body And if so, yes, can we move then on to, thank you all of you, and thank you Richard for putting this into a more concise and focused report. Thank you. And Kay as well, who did a lot of it. Can we move then on to item 14, practice delivery agreement? And once again, just for the public to understand, as we said at the outset, if the public have just joined us, this is here for the governing body to approve the process we've used and the content. It's not here for governing body to approve the financial framework. That will be approved in the non-conflicted environment of the Primary Care Commissioning Committee. So Madhuri.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Practice Development Agreement, or otherwise called as PDA, as we know, is a rolling program which has been there since 2014-15. It's an agreement between Barnsley CCG and all GP practices within Barnsley. The aim is to invest in capacity needed to deliver consistently high standard of general practice across Barnsley. This has been reviewed and refreshed with consideration to challenges for primary care, particularly during COVID-19 pandemic. The main focus of the PDA is to enhance the quality of care and thereby reduce health inequalities of patients living in Barnsley. The PDA for 2022-23 focuses on promoting services that are clinically safe and effective following COVID-19 pandemic, and also on digital primary care development and also supporting practices with recovery from COVID-19 pandemic. PDA development meetings are well attended with representation from CCG, practice managers, local medical committee, GP members, and the final drafts have already been presented to all of them. And like Nick mentioned, it is here today for assurance. It will be taken, or it has been taken to Primary Care Commissioning Committee for approval from a financial perspective. In terms of the schemes that are there for this year, Scheme 1 is relating to long COVID, so it basically involves training to general practitioners for assessment and referral pathways for patients suffering with long COVID. Scheme number 2 is around cancer, the aim being to minimize harm due to COVID on cancer pathway deliveries. There's also a new tool that's been inculcated into GP practice tools or GP practice systems called as See the Signs, which should help general practitioners in early diagnosis of cancer. The Scheme 3 is for improving cardiovascular diseases for people in Barnsley. And so in the Scheme 3 itself, there are various elements such as atrial fibrillation, heart failure, secondary prevention. The details of the schemes are there within the papers that are already presented. Scheme 4 is around admin support, the aim being to increase admin capacity to clear any backlog in general practice, and also invest in care navigation training for all admin staff so patients get right care at right time and right place. Scheme 5 is to improve dementia diagnosis rate and support the borough in being a dementia-friendly town. Scheme 6 is to support the national, regional and local IT and digital projects for 2022-23, including moving on to cloud-based telephony, shared care records, digitalization, etc. And the Scheme 5 is to deliver the requirements of Medicines Management Optimization Scheme. I'd just like to add a little bit more about Scheme 7. So as we know, there is a constant development and change in the evidence base that is associated with medications. So as people get older, the risks associated with medicines increases due to changes in body functions. So it's important that we review continually medications which are being given to patients. In this way, Barnsley patients will continue to receive medicines which offer best outcomes and also reduce the risk of any adverse effects that they may experience, particularly as people age and we have an aging population. So like I said, further detail of the schemes are there in the paper, and I will open this for questions at this point. Thank you.
Thanks, Madhuri. So got quite a lot of content in that, in the areas that we're going to focus on. So this point, happy to take any questions from anybody about the content of the PDA. Okay, can't see any hands up. Well, our ask then is on page 107 of the report, which is to approve the proposed schemes for inclusion within the is it 21-22?
22-23.
I thought so, 22-23
22-23.
PDA. Understanding that the financial allocation will be done outside governing body in the Primary Care Commissioning Committee, and recognising that the governance process to date has included all the elements of primary care to get to this point. Then there is separation when it comes into the CCG and we look at the costing of that. So as the governing body, if there are no further questions or comments or clarifications, I think the governing body is happy to approve the content of the PDA. Thank you. So thank you for that, Madhvi. And that moves us on to item 15. Neuro rehab, the latest spec. Is Siobhan with us?
She is joining, but we're probably a little bit in front.
Okay, what we can do then is we can, if she joins in a few minutes, I think we could probably do, Jane, if that's okay, quality highlights report, item 16. Would that be okay?
Yeah, no problem, Chair, that's fine. So the Quality and Patient Safety Committee met on the 14th of April and wanted to highlight 4 areas to the governing body today. 3 areas are RAG rated as green and 1 as red. And this paper's here for assurance and information. So the first one, RAG rated as green, was a paper that was taken to the committee with regards to training staff for Mental Capacity Act and the deprivation of liberty safeguards. It was agreed that this would be introduced as part of the mandatory and statutory training for staff, but would be introduced on a risk assessed basis. So that would be for all clinical roles and non-clinical roles for staff who are likely to come across MCA and DOLS within the remit of their work. So the committee agreed that it would be introduced as part of the statutory and mandatory, but introduced on a risk assessed basis. The second, again, RAG rated as green, was an update on the specialist clinical portfolio. So this includes obviously the complex cases and so on. The update was given and the committee were assured with regards to progress in those key areas. The third, RAG rated as green. So the committee was updated on the recent developments to the Barnsley Safeguarding Children's Partnership, in particular to the revised and reduced list of key priorities for the next 3 years. The 4 areas are included in the update report. So there was assurance given there with regards to safeguarding priorities. And the 4th one that was RAG rated as red was an issue that was raised by the head of medicines optimisation in relation to the hospital discharge letters, in particular the medication changes and the reconciliation of medication not being robust enough. So there are a number of actions that have been picked up by the quality team going forward, and obviously one of those includes being raised at the next Barnsley Hospital Clinical Quality Board and to review the risk register. So there's a number of actions that we've picked up following the Quality and Patient Safety Committee. So that's the update for the 4 key areas that the committee wanted to update the governing body on. And the ask is to confirm whether further assurances are required in relation to the items rated as red. So that was about the discharge summaries. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Chris Millington.
Yeah, just want to confirm that within the narrative box, it talks about a lay member, which is me, wanted to raise this at the governor's meeting, which I did yesterday. And I really did yet again emphasize to the non-executives how important this was for the people of Barnsley and for our GP practices. And in fact, the area that it's been on our risk register for as long as I can remember. It was on hospital risk register, which they took off at some stage. But I got the agreement from one of the non-executives that they would in fact take this now on board as a special subject, and this non-executive director has agreed to come back to hospital governors to update us as and when she can.
Thank you, Chris. Let's hope that results in some improvement, because D1s have been on our risk register and a focus of our attention for 6 or 7 years, with massive efforts having gone in from governing body and from clinicians, and it remains on our risk register. If you look at page 203 with a risk of 20. So, you know, as we've said before on many occasions, that's not good enough. And I'm quite saddened in many ways that one of the legacies that we have is that we leave a document such as the D1, a major communication document for patients' well-being on discharge from hospital, with a risk score of 20. So, but Jane's very much aware of that, and we have made massive efforts around this before. So I hope your interventions, Chris, can move us forward on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on the quality highlights report for Jane? No, if not, thank you. I think we note that for assurance and the comments we've made. Thank you, Jane. So I think Siobhan is here, so we can go back to item 15. Would you like to take us through that, Siobhan?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, governing body.
Good morning.
So this paper is a continuation of a number that have come to the governing body over the last 9 to 12 months. And this paper is to ask the governing body to approve the updated specification for the neuro rehabilitation unit that is currently commissioned and being run by SWIFT. The aim of this paper really is to let you know that after the last governing body meeting in January, it was asked of me if I would update the specification based on the comments and feedback that were given to me by the governing body and the clinical forum. I have done that now, and I'm presenting to you the updated specification that includes everything that the clinical forum and governing body asked for me to include. So that includes, for example, that we have reporting back and within the care plans by SWIFT about if they're including early supported discharge planning within everybody's care plan for patients to go on the NIU, and that is an essential element of the care planning right from the start. There was also asked to make sure that within the reporting specifications and the specification that there is something about making sure we've got ongoing patient experience feedback and reporting coming back from SWIFT. I can confirm that that is definitely going to happen. So thank you for the feedback. We've made sure that's gone into the contracting. So finally, all I wanted to say is that will governing body please approve now this specification to be put into SWIFT's contract based on the fact that I've taken on board and included everything, the feedback from the governing body and clinical forum, and I've also worked with SWIFT to make sure that they are happy and can actually mobilise and report back on what we're asked them to do within this specification.
I think in the spec you've highlighted the changes as suggested by both clinical forum and governing body, so governing body members can track back to without having to rely purely on memory, can track back to what we asked for and what changes have been included. So thank you for that, and I realise it's been quite a process, but I think we've got there. It's here for approval, but I think first of all I'll be very happy to take any questions or comments from governing body. None. Okay. So,
James got a hand up, Chair.
Jane.
Sorry, thanks, Chair. No, I mean, I'm fully supportive of the specification. Thank you, Siobhan, for obviously leading on this over the past 9 to 12 months. I suppose just for me is about, whether a quality impact assessment could be, I don't know if it's being carried out. I haven't, so that's absolutely fine. Because I do remember signing something, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it was a quality impact
one.
assessment. Yeah, I did do it right at the start, and quality, yeah, most definitely, yeah.
Perfect, thanks, Siobhan.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Thank you for that. If there are no other questions or points of clarification, the governing body's happy to approve this specification, and we're asked to do things, approve the final spec, and that the updated spec and reporting requirements go into the SWIFT contract. So we're happy to agree that recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for that, Siobhan. Can we move then on to 16? We've done 17, risk and governance exception report, which covers the assurance framework, the risk register, and a series of annual assurance committee reports. Richard, do you want to take us through those, please?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Nick. Hopefully a relatively straightforward report from myself today. So in the paper, you've got the assurance framework as usual, which we have continued to review and to update as necessary. The assurance framework is not significantly different from the last time the governing body saw it. As I say, it's just been subject to routine updates, so it's there presented to you for your assurance against those key areas that are outlined in it. Again, as far as the risk register is concerned, that has also continues to be reviewed and updated by the risk owners. You've got an extract of the red risks on the risk register in your pack. There's been no sort of significant changes again either to the content of the risk register or to the scores that we've allocated to the risks on it since the last time we met. So that again is there really for your assurance and information, and or any comments that you may have. And then finally, we've got the committee assurance reports for governing body today. So I think we'll probably all now be familiar with these. Each committee produces one of these reports every year, just to provide assurance to the governing body and to the accountable officer that the committees have discharged their functions under their terms of reference and have conducted their business in an appropriate way. All of those have been signed off by the relevant committees. All of those have been through the audit committee as well for oversight there. So they are really just here for information and for noting by the governing body, and they form part of our sort of suite of assurance documents, if you like, that we bring through governing body as part of the accounts and annual report close down process. So that's all I was going to say. Was there any? Happy to take any comments or questions should anybody have any.
Okay, can't see anybody raising a hand. Just one question from me then, Richard. Already mentioned the D1 risk, 1415-203, so won't re-mention that. There is another one on page 198, which is risk 2105, and that talks about face-to-face oncology appointments. And I think there has been some updates since March in terms of this is a South Yorkshire Basset Law South Yorkshire challenge, not just a Barnsley challenge now. And I think there might be some explanatory narrative to go in there. I think you would agree with that, Chris? There's a little bit in there. I mean, we have picked it up at the joint committee in terms of it, the oncology face-to-face being a result of national recruitment issues, and that Barnsley is not the only place facing these challenges. So I think a bit of narrative in there at some point. We'll just update that from March. Any other questions on either the assurance framework, the risk register, or the series of committee annual assurance reports for Richard? Jamie?
Yeah, Nick, and I think it's just with this being the sort of last sort of CCG governing body meeting, we've got obviously a number of risks on here, haven't we? We've probably touched on it before, but in terms of assurance for us and for the public, the risks that we've identified are still going to be risks in the Barnsley system in future, aren't they? So I guess it was just, Richard, confirmation as to how our risk register is sort of shared into either the ICB to consider, is this a risk across South Yorkshire and how it flows through, or into whatever the Barnsley based sort of committee is. And I didn't know whether there were a formal process for that yet that we could share with.
So there is,
perhaps.
Yeah, there is, Jamie, and there was a paper went into Change and Transition Board yesterday, sort of talking about that really. So as the Corporate and Functions Task and Finish Group, which is what I'm on, has sort of shared the 4 CCG risk registers, and we're going through a process now of doing a comparison of those to see if there's any risks sitting on the CCG risk registers that need to be put onto a sort of ICB corporate risk register going forward. So that piece of work is underway, and I'll be engaging with colleagues within the CCG to seek your views on what, if anything, needs to be escalated in that way. There will, though, as you say, be a number of the risks that are currently on the CCG's risk register, which will continue into the new world and will continue to be more appropriately managed at a place level rather than necessarily going onto an ICB corporate risk register. And so what we're proposing to do is to just continue to maintain our risk register and report it through the whatever sort of place-based arrangements are established going forward. So it'll be a combination of some of the risks on our risk register will continue to be managed at place. Some, or a version of some, will be put onto a corporate risk register for the ICB, and then we'll need a mechanism for escalation or de-escalation between those two documents going forward, I think.
Sure.
So there's going to be a transitioning of place and corporate risks. So there's going to be a summation of risks which are going to be corporate across the ICB, and also those that are more locally sensitive that place can perhaps influence.
Yeah.
So because we understand that transition process is still being worked through, it might be a good idea. I don't know when audit committee meets. If it meets in June, it might be a good idea for, before we are abolished on the 30th of June, to just have a better understanding of what those arrangements are. So I would imagine they would come later in June.
Yes, that's right. So we can certainly do that. There is an audit committee in June to sign off the annual account. So we could take something there, or I can just share where we are with members of the audit committee. Or
in our governing body change and transition meetings, if we have one left, it would be good to just have that there as well.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sure. Yeah, so the management of risk is very important, isn't it? And that we hand over our risks and that they're managed as we go forward. Yeah, so we probably need that. Okay, so the governing body ask is on page 184, I think. And I think we've reviewed the framework. Additional positive assurances, we've talked about the transition of risk. We've reviewed the risk register, and we've noted the committee annual assurance reports. So I think we've completed the governing body ask.
We have, thank you.
Thank you for that, Richard. Can we then move on to item 18, the integrated performance report? So how do you want to do this, Jamie and Roxana? Do you want to bring out the finance bit first, Roxana, or let Jamie do the performance and then go into the financial plan? Which way do you want to do it?
I can do the finance bit first, if that's all right.
Okay.
Probably not much to say from a financial year-end perspective anyway, because the governing body are cited on the financial position. So I think just in terms of where the CCG ended the year, we delivered a surplus of 1.597 million, which is included in the paper. This is subject to audit. So we have got the auditors with the CCG at the moment. We are expecting, we've been getting weekly updates and there's nothing to report to the governing body at this stage. Final sign off of the accounts is expected on the 16th of June. So that's where we can then confirm our year-end financial position. Just one thing for the governing body to note, really, and I suppose it becomes much more important as we move forward into the ICB and as place-based arrangements come to the fore, really, is around efficiency plans and the level of efficiency that we have actually achieved against the targets, which obviously have been significantly impacted due to the financial regime and the impact of COVID. But the CCG delivered 3.9 million against its planned target of 4.6 million, with the balance then delivered through in-year mitigations and in-year underspend. So as we move forward as a system, we are going to have to be in a position where we are developing robust plans that will deliver as 22-23 does become extremely challenged. So those are the key things for the governing body to know on the financial position.
Okay, so I think are there any questions for Oksana, or is it fairly clear to all of us? We have been kept on track. So if that's fine, thank you, Oksana. Jamie, do you want to talk through the performance part of the report, please?
Yeah, thank you. So again, I'll assume that governing body members have had an opportunity to read through and look at the information included in the report. So we'll just pull out the key areas. So first of all, urgent care, urgent and emergency care. So you'll see from the paper continues to be extremely challenged. We're still seeing high numbers of patients attending at certain times, which is having a negative impact in terms of performance and waiting times. So March were the sort of latest position that we'd got, but 66.8 or just below were seen within 4 hours. So quite a high number of people who were waiting longer than 4 hours to be seen and treated in A&E. That follows through in terms of ambulance. So because of the pressures in A&E departments in Barnsley, it's reflected across other areas as well. Seen an increase in ambulance handover delays, so those that take over 30 minutes and over 60 minutes, and again not just because of those delays in handovers, but there's obviously contributory factor challenges in terms of ambulance response time. So if we've got more demand for ambulances, we've got more ambulances tied up in queues at hospitals or other areas, then that has an impact in terms of the time that it takes to respond to patients. And you can see from the numbers included there that for category 1, the most urgent calls, it's taking currently 9 minutes and 35 seconds. That is slightly better than overall YAS position, but the target is 7 minutes, so it is taking a little longer. And likewise for category 2 calls, taking longer than the target, which obviously has a negative impact on patients. So I think I referenced on the assurance report work that's taking place at South Yorkshire, particularly focusing on those areas. From a planned care perspective, whilst in the appendix, you can see there's still areas that are on red against sort of constitution standards. It's actually a relatively positive position. So we are seeing a stable position in terms of the 18-week wait. Slight deterioration this month, but it's a fraction of a percent. However, the work that has been done to reduce long waiters is gradually sort of reducing that. So you can see from the table that's on the 3rd page that we are seeing a reduction for Barnsley patients, people waiting over 52 weeks across all categories. And I guess just to confirm again, at Barnsley, the 104-week waiters, so people who have waited for 2 years, there are 7 of them, continues to work down. There are none at Barnsley Hospital. And the plans that we've submitted are to make sure that happens throughout the year, so we'll not have a growing waiting list. The other bit in there is around diagnostics, and again a positive trend but not yet back to where we were. So 15% of patients are having to wait over 6 weeks. So 85 are now being seen within 6 weeks. Pre-COVID, that were consistently 99% of people seen within 6 weeks. So it dipped to 50. It's improving month on month, and again we plan to get back to the position where 99% are achieving are seen within 6 weeks by the end of the year. Mental health is pretty much as previously reported, so we're working to try and increase access and make sure people are able to access IAP services, and again there's a paper later around that and investment and on private. In terms of people moving to recovery who do access the service, we're achieving the target, and waiting times, so people who wait 6 weeks for the service, we're achieving the targets there as well. And then finally, cancer, and we've had a period of time where it's been difficult to achieve the standards across all of the cancer pathways. I think there's some good news in this report that in the month we were achieving the 2 week wait target and 2 week wait breast, which has been a significant challenge due to capacity in the service and access to the workforce to do the services. And then the key one for me is the faster diagnosis standard. So there's a standard that is relatively new, but that all patients should be diagnosed within 28 days of referral. The target's 75%, and we've not previously been at that level, but at the end of February we did achieve that figure. So I expect us to sort of stay there or thereabouts, might dip back below, but that is a real positive because that means we're diagnosing people quicker, which means they're then able to move on to treatment. But we still need to see some improvement on the second part of the pathway, which is the treatment element. So that's me.
Okay, so any questions on performance to Jamie? No? Okay, thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Roxana. So we conclude item 18 and we move on to item 19, financial plan. Please, Roxana, which is here for, has been recommended by Finance and Performance for approval by the governing body.
Thanks, Chair. So just to provide governing body with a bit of an overview, really. So the Finance and Performance Committee have been involved in the oversight of a number of iterations of the financial plan. And included in the report is kind of what things have changed throughout that draft plan period. There's probably one important thing just to note before I do kind of ask the governing body for approval, and that is that we have been asked that plans may not yet be final, as there may be some further work to be done from an NHS England perspective, because we are still working towards the achievement of financial balance. And as governing body can see from this paper, the CCG's current position is not financial balance. So it's important that we note that we've not received any guidance yet on what that programme of work would look like, what we're going to be asked to do, but there is a conversation with Julian Kelly, Director of NHS England Finance, next week, so hopefully we'll get some next steps there. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the governing body. So the current position then, as I've just noted, is a deficit plan of £5.5 million. That does include an efficiency requirement of 13 million, of which 4 million is currently unidentified in the plan. The CCGs, it's important to note that when the CCG closes on the 30th of June, we will be balanced off. So our financial, whatever we spend up to month 3, will be balanced off with the budget. So actually the financial risk of delivery sits within the ICB, but clearly we've got to contribute to the delivery of that. But the risk actually in terms of the year-end position does actually sit within the Integrated Care Board. So that's an important thing for us to note. The details of the allocations are set out in section 5.2 of the report, and section 5.3 sets out the efficiency plans that we've got in place currently. The plan detail, which is here for approval, is in section 5.4, and we just need to note that the details of that may change subject to this further national call. But again, at this point, we've got to where we've got to, stretching from a CCG perspective as far as we possibly can based on the allocations we've been given from the ICB. So in terms of the ask of governing body then, the plan has been supported by the Finance and Performance Committee as the final position, and therefore I'm asking that the governing body approve the position subject to obviously further national guidance being issued, but on the basis that this can then allow some reporting to commence within the finance team. So the ask is for you to approve the budget, or I'll take any questions if there are any to answer today.
Okay, are we happy to, are there any questions first of all? I think Roxanne has kept the Finance and Performance Committee fairly close to this, and I think we do understand that there may be some national influences that change things, but they're beyond our grasp currently, but may influence this position. Chris, do you want to come
I just wanted to thank Roxana, because Roxana and the other chief finance officers have faced the most challenging year and most uncertain planning process I've ever experienced. So to get into this stage is quite an achievement. So Roxana, well done.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So we're happy to approve the financial plan with the caveat that Roxana and I have outlined. Okay, thank you. That's good. So we then move on to a series of committee reports and minutes, and we have some unadopted minutes of the Audit Committee of 17th of March and the 21st of April. In the absence of Nigel, who would take questions on that? Who's the Vice or Deputy Chair of the Audit Committee? Chris Millington, thank you. I thought it was you, Chris, but I didn't want to labour you unnecessarily, burden you unnecessarily. Are there any questions anybody has for Chris on those minutes? They're not adopted yet, but if there are no thoughts, points of clarification, we'll move on to 20.2. These are approved minutes from Finance and Performance, 2 lots, 3rd of March and 7th of April. Most of the detail of which will have been sequentially subsumed into the financial plan anyway. If there are any questions, happy to take questions. They're here for information. Okay, so 20.3, Assurance Report of Primary Care Commissioning Committee of the 24th of March, and then some minutes of the 27th of January. Chris, is there anything you wish to draw out of these?
Nothing on March, Chair.
Yeah.
In relation to January the 27th, the report is here for assurance. It's 13 pages long. I'm sure my colleagues have read through it. In terms of highlights, we touched on and discussed Winter Access Fund. Final decision was made at an extraordinary meeting on the 16th of December. We talked about additional funding that would support primary care with practice resilience and the increased need to work from home. Requests were put into each GP practice, and the message that came back was we need more laptops, so we went forward with that. And there were various reports which we accepted in relation to CQC across our healthcare GP practices, including the Healthcare Federation. That's as much as I want to talk about this morning, unless anybody's got any further questions.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Are there any questions for Chris? Roxana, you've got a look of consternation on your face. Is it something you want to pick up here or outside? No. Okay. Well, smiling's better. Okay. At least Thank you for that then, Chris. And we move on to 20.4. Going back to the 17th of February, the minutes of the Quality and Patient Safety Committee. We've had QPS highlights on governing body today. Is there anything there, Jane, that you wish to share with us? That's okay.
Additional, no.
No. Anybody want to ask Jane anything about these? No. Okay. So thank you for that. Sorry, Madhuri, was there anything in there that you wanted to draw out? No. Thank you. So so that's the end of our last governing body in public as a CCG. It's our last meeting in public. I'd like to thank our staff and governing body members, current and present, because we've had some really influential and charismatic people that have helped us in the past and as are helping us today, and we hope that work continues for place. I'd like to thank also the public for their contribution in engagement and in our public governing bodies, including Save Our NHS, who have kept us on our toes. I'd like to thank Kay, who has sat by me for 100 governing bodies. 100 governing bodies, I think you've managed, haven't you, Kay? Kay?
I probably have, perhaps a few more with extraordinary meetings as well. Yeah.
And then I think we have to wish well the future and successor organisation and the ICB that they can continue to deliver outcomes to the people of Barnsley. And I think at that point we close it and move to private, really. But thank you all, and we hope again that the new changes serve the people of Barnsley as well as we proudly have. Thank you. So I think we'll have 15